On this edition of Primetime News, Korea struggles to contain an outbreak of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. More than 1,600 people are quarantined, and the WHO warns the outbreak is likely to expand. And lawmakers and medical experts put their heads together to come up with more effective ways to battle the outbreak, including setting up a hospital dedicated to dealing with infectious diseases. Korea's gross national income accelerates, but many don't seem to feel it as private spending is still growing at a sluggish pace. These stories and more up next.
Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Thursday, June 4th. I'm Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Thank you for joining us.
Our starting point today is again the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome or MERS outbreak here in Korea. For the latest, let's connect with our Park Ji-won in the news center.
So Ji-won, one more death from MERS was confirmed today, bringing the total number of deaths from the disease to 3. What more can you tell us?
Well, Ji-hye, the person was 82-year-old man who died Wednesday night, and he was confirmed to have the virus earlier today. It was the first death from a tertiary infection, which means he had no direct contact with the first patient. He was exposed to the virus last month while he was receiving treatment for pneumonia and kidney failure at a hospital in Daejeon, where another man who was later diagnosed with MERS was also hospitalized.
So now the total number of confirmed cases has risen to 36, and that includes the man in Daejeon, right?
That's right, Daniel. 6 new cases were confirmed Thursday, including the death case in Daejeon, bringing the total to 36. According to the nation's health ministry, 2 of the new patients are medical personnel who treated confirmed MERS patients. Another 3 contracted the virus while visiting family members and patients who shared hospital wards with MERS patients. Also, a Korean Air Force officer stationed at the Osan Air Base has been isolated after an initial test showed that he had the virus. The health authorities performed additional tests to make a final MERS confirmation, and the result is expected to come out at midnight. The officer was exposed to the virus while he was staying at a hospital in Gyeonggi-do province that treated MERS patients. Well, if the second test comes back positive, the officer will be the first MERS case in the Korean military. At present, roughly 90 soldiers who have been in contact with the officer are under quarantine.
And of course, the number of people in quarantine is increasing daily. Where are we at now, Ji-won?
Ji-hye, health authorities have so far placed over 1,600 people in quarantine, about 1,500 in their homes and the rest in state-run medical facilities. In another preventive measure, more than 1,100 schools have been decided to temporarily close for the remainder of this week, with the majority of them in Gyeonggi-do province, where the first MERS case was reported.
The parents and educators are clearly the ones to take drastic actions, and they're taking necessary precautions, I believe. Can you tell us more about how dangerous the virus is?
Well, Daniel, the fatality rate for previously documented cases of the MERS virus is roughly 35%. But here in Korea, we are at 3 deaths, a fatality rate of 8.3%, which is an increase from 5.7% this morning. But it's still very early to tell. Health officials say your reaction to the virus depends largely on the strength of your immune system. MERS may be more dangerous for those who are already suffering from respiratory issues or kidney failures, or anyone using steroids, which is known to weaken the immune system. Well, they can be seen in the case of the first patient who died after receiving treatment with steroids for arthritis, and the second and third MERS patients who died were suffering from chronic lung disease. Well, now the government is really emphasizing that all the confirmed patients picked up the virus at hospitals where they were in pretty close proximity to previous MERS patients for extended periods of time. And as of now, there are no known cases of people contracting MERS outside of hospitals.
All right, Ji-won, thanks so much for that report. And at the National Assembly, the viral outbreak actually brought lawmakers together no longer locking horns. They were united in gathering efforts to contain the virus.
That's right. They met with medical experts to formulate ways to resolve the MERS crisis and also to prevent future outbreaks. Our Ji Myung-gil has the details.
The ruling Saenuri party said it will push for a hospital dedicated to dealing with infectious diseases and allocate funds to counter the MERS outbreak.
Countries like Hong Kong and Singapore have special quarantine hospitals. We'll allocate special budgets this year to improve the country's ability to handle contagious disease, including the construction of a dedicated quarantine hospital.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy also called on the government to consider leveling up the country's epidemic alert and promised to work with the Saenuri party to ensure funding for all containment efforts.
If the presidential house of Cheongwade demands supplementary budgets from the National Assembly to resolve the MERS crisis, we're more than willing to fully cooperate.
Medical experts said the government needs to increase support for the country's hospitals, especially in one area.
Medium and small-sized hospitals need full support with medical supplies within 2 to 3 days. Even the bigger university hospitals are running out of supplies for both patients and medical staff.
Both parties promised to help the government quell growing public anxiety and rebuild trust. The Parliamentary Health Committee and special MERS committees will work closely with the Health Ministry to share more information about MERS with the public. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
And for more on Korea's response to the MERS outbreak and what people can do individually, precautions they can take to protect themselves, let's turn to our Connie Kim, who is joining us in the studio. Thank you for joining us, Connie.
My pleasure, Daniel.
Connie, so mask sales have shot up due to growing concerns about disease transmission, and you had a chance to actually talk with some of the people. What did they have to say?
Right, yeah, well, anywhere in Korea, it was very easy to spot people wearing masks to stay away from the virus. Now, health authorities have said that it's very unlikely for people to contract the virus outside the hospitals where MERS patients are receiving treatment, but I guess that wasn't enough to calm public anxiety.
I'm a bus driver in Seoul. Since I encounter countless people every day, I've started washing my hands more often.
I'm afraid I'll get the disease. After I go into a store with lots of people, I always make sure to wash my hands.
I'm trying to stay away from crowded places, especially movie theaters or stadiums, just to be safe.
Well, Korea's infectious disease crisis alert level is currently at cautious, the third highest of 5 levels. Now, at this level, the government designates hospitals authorized to provide treatment for the disease. There was some speculation that the level would be raised a notch to a warning, under which an emergency response system is in 24 standby mode.
Well, Connie, speaking of alert levels, people weren't really happy with the government's initial response. It seemed a little lacking. And I've heard you got the chance to turn to experts about their views. What did they say about the government's response?
Well, a former director of the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said that the government actually did fail to carry out the appropriate initial measures. It actually took days for health authorities to detect the first MERS case, and making things worse, Korea wasn't able to quickly track down the people the first patient had contact with, resulting in secondary and tertiary infections. Now, but still, the professor says the country has enough treatment facilities to handle any new cases.
Looking at the number of infected patients, we have enough treatment facilities for MERS patients. Even if we see an explosive rise in the number of patients in the coming days, the country will designate more hospitals authorized to treat MERS patients.
Now, currently, there are 17 designated hospitals with special containment wards capable of blocking the virus's spread. Now, that's a total of 105 beds. Professor Chun added that containment and quarantine measures are the priority at the moment.
And how long will the outbreak continue? What did the experts have to say about that?
Well, it's too early to tell when the virus's spread is going to slow down, because May 20th was when the first MERS case was detected, and when that first first MERS patient was isolated. Now, the first 14-day incubation period for the first MERS patient has passed, but there are lingering concerns because secondary and tertiary infections have been reported.
I expect that this virus will be transmitted and have a circulation until next weekend, because at the first time, the 2 weeks is a very critical time for the incubation period. However, now in these days, secondary and tertiary infection was identified and confirmed.
Now, until the outbreak subsides, experts suggest some things that people can do to protect themselves. They say people should wash their hands frequently because the virus can spread all over the body once a person touches their eyes, nose, or lips. Never wear the same mask twice. Now, that's because a mask could transmit the virus if a person comes into contact with someone who's infected with the disease, so discarding it is highly recommended. And people over 50 should avoid visiting people in the hospital, especially because people in that age group are more susceptible to the illness. Now, there was rumor circulating that said putting Vaseline in your nose is an effective preventive measure, but it's been proven false. And if you have symptoms of the disease, including fever or a cough, make sure to go to the doctor or contact the Health Ministry's MERS hotline for further instruction.
Right, it seems like it's always the most basic things that we need to keep in mind and adhere to, and not pay too much attention to those things that are not really being filtered through proper channels.
That's right, and thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it, Connie.
My pleasure.
On the country's economic front, Korea's gross national income grew at its fastest pace in almost 6 years in the first quarter of this year. But the dramatic rise in the key indicator of the population's purchasing power is not translating to greater consumption. Our Shin Se-min explains.
The Bank of Korea says the nation's gross national income in the first 3 months of the year rose 4.2% on quarter, reaching over $339 billion. That's the fastest growth recorded since the second quarter of 2009, when it spiked 5%. The central bank attributes the gain to the fall in import prices.
The rise in GNI is largely due to better terms of trade, thanks to the lower global oil prices.
But the stronger purchasing power failed to boost domestic demand, with private consumption edging up a mere 0.6% in the first quarter this year from a quarter earlier. Facilities investment also ended up rising just 0.2%.
We saw an increase in savings, but not in domestic investment. That indicates that consumer sentiment is shaky, leading to sluggish spending.
And there are growing market expectations that the central bank will cut the key rate next week, which already stands at a historic low of 1.75%, to further prop up the domestic economy. The central bank says the economy also grew in the first quarter this year, but just by 0.8%, a pickup from the previous quarter. But it's still below 1%, leaving experts questioning whether the economy is on a steady path to recovery. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye held summit talks with Macky Sall, the president of Senegal, today. According to the presidential office, the meeting was the result of Seoul's efforts to expand its global diplomacy to focus on co-prosperity with the African continent. We turn to our Chae Yoo-sun for more on this story.
Senegalese President Macky Sall first presented a mid- to long-term development plan for his country in 2013, consisting of 26 projects in infrastructure, energy, education, agriculture, and tourism. While Senegal will formally see Korean investment in that plan, estimated at $10 billion at a business leaders' luncheon on Friday, the governments of Seoul and Dakar agreed to work together to secure Korean participation. President Park said Korea has chosen Senegal as one of the countries with which it will strengthen development cooperation next year, and she hopes it will allow the two sides to enhance their bilateral cooperation. President Sall highlighted the growing friendship and trust between their countries since forging diplomatic relations in 1962. Injecting nearly $500 million of its Economic Development Cooperation Fund, Korea is close to completing construction of 2 ships that will travel between Senegal's southern and northern regions. It plans to commit some $900 million more this year to further develop Senegal's maritime infrastructure. Through such projects, President Bak's office says Korea is laying down a foundation for further cooperation with a country that holds great potential in maritime affairs and fisheries in West Africa. The two sides also agreed to work together on building a free economic zone in Senegal and developing the African nation's agricultural sector. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
In other news, the United States has called on Korea to play a bigger role in opposing Beijing's territorial claims in the South China Sea. The issue could pose a fresh dilemma for Seoul as it finds itself stuck between its 2 closest partners. For this report, we turn to our Hwang Ji-hye.
Speaking at a seminar in Washington on Wednesday, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell slammed China's land reclamation projects in the South China Sea. Pointing out that Korea is not directly involved in the dispute, Russell said Seoul has all the more reason to speak out because it's speaking not in self-interest but in support of universal principles. He added Korea must assume the role of a major stakeholder in the international order. This is the first time a senior American official has asked Seoul to get involved, and it comes as Washington steps up pressure against Beijing on this issue. Last week, U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter urged Beijing to immediately halt its island-building activities in the South China Sea. U.S. officials say China's reclamation efforts have sped up, creating artificial islands that have expanded by 1,500 acres since last year. On Thursday, Seoul's foreign ministry expressed hopes for a peaceful resolution to the dispute, but maintained its distance on the matter.
Our government hopes for peace and stability in the South China Sea by a complete and effective implementation of the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea and a swift changing of the Code of Conduct between China and the ASEAN countries.
Some say President Park Geun-hye's trip to Washington later this month could be an opportunity for U.S. President Barack Obama to bring up the issue again. If so, the territorial disputes may put Korea in a very difficult position between its 2 superpower partners. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
An OECD annual report showed that in comparison to other member nations, Koreans feel less satisfied with their lives. While they set great importance on social relations, a relatively large number of people said they don't know who to rely on in times of need. Our Son Jung-in helps us look closer at the rankings.
The Better Life Index, published every year by the OECD, rates the 34 member nations, as well as Brazil and Russia, on 11 variables that contribute to a high quality of life, including income, health, and life satisfaction. This year, Korea ranked 27th, down 2 notches from last year. Australia remained at the top, followed by Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, and Denmark. Korea scored badly in 5 indicators, including social connections, subjective well-being, health status, and work-life balance, with all ranking in the lowest 20%. When asked if they had someone they could rely on in a time of need, only 72% of Koreans said yes. That was the lowest figure in the OECD, which had an average score of 88%. In the work-life balance category, Korea ranked 1 from bottom in the OECD at 33rd, with nearly a fifth of adults working 50 hours or more a week on average. When it came to life satisfaction, which measures how people evaluate their life on a scale from 0 to 10, Koreans had a score of 5.8, lower than the OECD average of 6.6. However, despite its low satisfaction ranking, the report showed Korea remained above average in civic engagement, personal security, jobs, and education. The report says these factors play a key role in providing individuals with skills to participate effectively in society and in the economy. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Time now for the top international headlines. Let's connect to Polly at the News Center.
Our focus today, FIFA insiders reveal a web of corruption in the world football body. The death toll rises from China's tragic boat sinking, and the largest private collection of supercars goes up for sale.
Paul, let's start off with the crisis facing FIFA. The amount of evidence mounting against the organization has been snowballing. This as current and former officials are being charged with bribery and abuse of power.
That's right. The latest to be forced out into the light is former FIFA Vice President Jack Warner. Speaking in Trinidad, he said he would fully cooperate with investigators and reveal an avalanche of secrets on one of the biggest scandals to hit the sport.
I also will give them my knowledge of financial transactions at FIFA, including, but not limited to Sepp Blatter. I have been there for 30 consecutive years. I was a heartbeat away from Blatter. I said to him in 2011, it's time, at 75, it's time to step down.
The U.S. Justice Department has charged Warner and over a dozen other FIFA executives of running a criminal enterprise involving more than $150 million in bribes. And shifting to southern China, it's been 3 days since a cruise ship carrying over 450 people capsized on the Yangtze River. Rescue efforts are continuing. However, officials say the chances of finding more survivors at this point have all but disappeared. This as hundreds are still missing. Teams were able to cut through the hull of the vessel early Thursday, recovering dozens of bodies and raising the death toll to 76.
Over 50% of the families have already arrived in Jianli. We attach great importance to the psychological counseling for the family members because a number of them will be experiencing feelings of grief.
Earlier, relatives of the victims clashed with police after being denied access to the disaster site. Interim results of the ongoing investigation revealed that the Eastern Star was not overloaded and had enough life jackets on board. The captain and chief engineer, who were among the first to escape, are under fire as they failed to sound any alarm as the ship went down. And switching gears now to the world of fast cars, high-end collectors are expected to dig deep into their pockets as one of the rarest McLaren F1s ever made is set to hit the auction block. The 1998 orange three-seater dubbed the LM specification is currently on display at Sotheby's headquarters in Manhattan. The auction house expects the supercar to bring in between $12 and $15 million when it goes on sale this summer.
It has the performance of a race car, the sound of a race car, the handling, 680 horsepower. It's an amazing car. It's breathtaking, extremely invigorating, especially when you hear it as well. So it's a very special car. They don't change hands very often. As I said, there's only 5 in the world like it. So it's quite special as a result.
The McLaren is one of the highlights of Sotheby's Pinnacle portfolio, which is expected to fetch a combined $65 million. Spanning 57 years, the collection includes the finest sports and racing vehicles, including the final Enzo Ferrari that was given to the late Pope John Paul II. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
We have a cloudy day in store for the entire nation tomorrow, and a light rain of up to 10 millimeters is in the forecast for the southern coastal regions and Jeju Island. And temperatures will finally go back to the seasonal norms tomorrow thanks to that clouds, which will block the sunshine, bringing down the temperatures into the low to mid-20s across the nation. So let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. Now, Seoul and Gwangju will rise to 26 and 27, and a much cooler day is in the forecast for Daegu and Busan, which will top out at just 22 and 21 respectively. And as for the other regions, it seems like Daejeon will hit 26, while Jeju Island and Dokdo look to be cool and breezy with highs of 20 and 21. Now, we'll enjoy a somewhat cool and breezy Friday tomorrow, and then temperatures will jump right back up on Saturday, and the heat wave is likely to continue for the time being. Well, that's all for the weather. Good night.
have so much respect for people like him. What I wouldn't give to become a true master of any craft.
It's pretty straightforward. Fail more times than a beginner has ever tried. On that note, we wrap up our newscast. As always, thanks for watching. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Do join us again, same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.